Previously on I Hear Dead People.
Who doesn't love sex? But sex permeates everything? Edible complex, penis envy, a fear of snakes means repressed sexual feelings about one's genitals? I'm sorry, but I shall not commit the fashionable stupidity of regarding everything that I cannot explain as a fraud. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So keep your shadows in front of you, for they can only take you down from behind. The shoe that fits one person pinches another. Nobody can know what the ultimate things are. We must, therefore, take them as we experience them. And if such experience helps to make your life healthier, more beautiful, more complete, and more satisfactory to yourself and those you love, you may safely say, this was the grace of God.
And I knew I am. I am what I am.
The experiencer is the experienced.
And it means looking at things which one takes for granted and suddenly seeing that they're very, very odd.
How do you keep your center when everybody around you is losing theirs?
And the thing that you call yourself, to which things happen, is just something that happens.
Well, that went by pretty quickly.
I know. And we didn't even get into his ideas about personality. I really wanted to know his Myers-Briggs type.
I believe he's on record saying that he's an introverted, intuitive, thinking type.
Okay. So an INT, what then?
The general consensus among the Myers-Briggs community is that he was either an INTJ or an INFJ. But remember, his work inspired them, but those designations didn't exist in Jung's world. Jung believed that we have complex, evolving psychologies, and there can never be a pure type.
Okay. But just go with me for a minute here. So T and F are thinking and feeling, right?
Right.
And J is judging?
Yeah, and so maybe Jung was both a T and an F.
Well, he certainly seemed more feeling than his former colleague, Freud.
Perhaps, and he never mentioned judging and perceiving. Those distinctions were added later in the Myers and Briggs system.
Interesting. I've read that a judging personality trait tends to prefer a planned and orderly approach to life. They value certainty and closure.
Okay, sure. That's how it's described. I'm guessing it reminds you of someone.
You got me. I'm an INTJ too. Like Jung, I suppose.
I see. And when did you take the assessment?
I don't know. Years ago in school, I guess.
Then you should probably take it again. I'm guessing that your understanding of yourself has evolved. It has since I've known you, and that may have changed your psychological brand.
Huh. Maybe I will. So what's your type? Let me guess. ENFP?
What makes you think that?
Oh, I don't know.
Last time I went through it, I was neutral on almost every one of the questions. So I guess I'm a psychological nothing, like a no one.
Or maybe you're a psychological everything, an EINSFTJP, or whatever you are. You're certainly not like anyone I've ever met.
I feel the same way about you.
Maybe it has something to do with your aphantasia.
Could be. Although I think it has more to do with Jung's idea of the persona and finding balance with one's opposing psychological traits.
Okay, you're far from balanced. So what do you mean by that?
Well, if you remember from our prep from this episode, Jung's idea of persona refers to the social mask or role that people present to the outside world. You know, the way we want to be seen and perceived by others.
I see. And since you don't really care about what other people think, your various personality traits like introversion and extroversion would be what? Fluid?
Exactly. They wouldn't automatically flow from my conditioning.
You're so damn evolved, Tom.
Yeah, right. Or unconscious, perhaps. Look, I play various roles like everyone else. In fact, I'm playing one right now. But play is the operative word. I'm aware that I'm simply taking on social roles. I don't confuse them with my authentic self, and so I don't attach myself to them. I can easily step in and out of them, and because of that, I may appear extroverted and intense in one setting and introverted and reserved in another. It depends.
Depends on what exactly?
The setting, and how I can be present and be my best self within that setting to offer what I can bring to the experience.
And what if people in that setting don't want what you have to offer?
Which happens, right? And when it does, I keep quiet and I observe. But at other times, I'll speak my mind and do my dance. That's the tension of living that we all have to dance with. Independence and interdependence. Self-expression and harmony with others. That said, you should never let the hardness of the world silence the song that's inside of you.
Got it. So are you disagreeing with Jung's ideas about personality or just Myers-Briggs types?
Well, neither and both. What I'm saying is that it's the relationship that ultimately matters. So improvise. I'm sure you've learned by now that there's fearlessness and then there's pig-headedness, right?
Yeah, you're right. And it was a tough lesson to learn.
So was there anything else you were hoping to cover with him?
I had in my notes to ask him about his infamous affair with his patient, Toni Wolff, but I really didn't know how to broach the subject.
Well, I'm glad you didn't broach it like that.
Why? What do you mean?
That's a total mischaracterization. Their relationship wasn't some sort of fling. It was complex and quite significant, emotionally and intellectually enriching both of their lives. Yes, Wolff initially began her association with Jung as a patient and then later as his student, but she eventually became an important figure in the field of psychoanalysis in her own right, and she helped Jung identify, define, and name some of his best-known concepts, particularly in the areas of analytical psychology and dream analysis.
Okay. I just heard it was controversial.
Yeah, of course it was, because it was unconventional. Not only did it blur the boundaries between therapist and patient, but it lasted for many years. And during that time, Wolff often traveled with Jung, attending conferences and seminars. And she wasn't simply a colleague and confidant, but there are also accounts of Wolff spending time with Jung, his wife Emma, and their children.
Yes, but I also read that the relationship strained Jung's marriage and caused emotional turmoil within his family.
Probably, but it's also likely that she supported Jung in crucial ways. Perhaps bringing him alive during his confrontation with his unconscious, his dark night of the soul, when he wrote the Red Book and developed many of his psychological theories. And so if there was no Wolff, there may not have been the Jung we know of today.
Very interesting. And I'm glad we're discussing her now. Got to give credit where it's due.
Anyway, what else?
You tell me. Did anything really stick with you?
Well, I'm fascinated with his idea about synchronicity.
Yeah, me too. And you know, I often confuse synchronicity with serendipity.
A lot of people do, because they kind of sound the same. Plus, they're similar in that they both involve unexpected events.
And so I'm clear, what's the difference again?
Serendipity is a happy accident, a chance encounter that leads to some fortunate outcome.
Ah, like the movie of the same name, where John Cusack ends up with Kate Beckinsale. Now that's a happy accident.
Now, how did I know you'd come up with that one? Or how about something that actually happened? Like that engineer in the 40s, I can't remember his name, who was working on springs to stabilize equipment on ships. He accidentally knocked one of the springs off a shelf, and it gracefully walked down to the ground. That inspired his creation of the Slinky.
I love that toy. And I suppose the same can be said for the discovery of penicillin and Viagra.
Right, and the microwave oven. I've had similar things happen to me, like when I got my idea for my first book and for one of my medical inventions. Anyway, synchronicity is different. It's a coincidence of events that are not causally related. They seem to have nothing to do with each other, but they are strangely connected by their meaning.
Right, like Jung's beetle experience. Do you have another example?
Like Jung's, most of them are personal. Like randomly opening a book and seeing a passage that is deeply relevant to your circumstances. That happened to me one time, and it absolutely blew my mind. It brought tears to my eyes. I also had a strange and meaningful encounter with a random bird the night I got word that my father had passed away. It lasted all night and into the next morning. It's difficult to describe the emotional and psychological impact of those types of experiences.
Fascinating.
Oh, wait, I've got a more well-known example for you. So this guy, Robertson, wrote a novel titled Futility that described a large unsinkable ship named the Titan that struck an iceberg and sank. It was written a decade before the actual Titanic disaster.
Wow. Now that's an interesting fact. Do you have one about Jung?
Before we do that, I'd like to read something to you, and I want you to really feel what Jung was trying to get across about our vast, various, and mysterious world.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, I used to read this at the closing of my talks to try to wake people up from their stupor. It's from an interview with the late great magician Doug Henning. He was asked what caused him to become a magician, and just listen to how he replied. He said, "I was getting a little bit of a reputation, and I was invited by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation to perform on Christmas shows for the troops. At one point on the tour, they asked if I would like to do a show for a group of Inuits. We were on the edge of this little town in the wilderness, 400 miles from the North Pole, and about 60 below zero. I set up my little show in a little building, and the Inuits came in to watch. They sat on the floor in their parkas, and I did what I thought was some pretty good stuff. They just sat there, didn't smile, didn't say a word, and at the end, nobody applauded, but they were completely focused on me like I was some sort of phenomenon. Only one of them spoke English, so I asked him, 'Did you like the show?' 'Yes, we like show,' he said. Then I asked, 'Did everybody like the magic?' He said, 'The magic?' I explained that I was trying to entertain people. He said, 'Entertainment is good, but why are you doing magic? The whole world is magical.' We sat down on the floor, and he told me, 'It's magic that snow falls. All those little crystals are completely different. That's magic.' I said, 'But what about when I made the rabbit and doves appear?' 'Why do you do those things?' he said. 'It's magic when the walrus appears each spring. He comes from nowhere. That's magic.' Now I was grasping, trying to explain magic to him. I thought of my zombie, which I thought was my best thing. I said, 'I made that beautiful silver ball float in the air. That's magic. But there's a ball of fire floating through the sky every day. It keeps us warm, gives us light. That's magic.' Then the Inuits started talking among themselves. The man came to me with a big smile on his face and said, 'Now we know why you are doing that. It's because your people have forgotten the magic. You're doing it to remind them of the magic. Well done.' I cried right then. I've never told anyone this story. I said, 'Thank you for teaching me about the magic. I didn't know.' That was really the first time I knew what wonder was. It was the most memorable thing that has ever happened to me. I never forgot that inside. That's why I became a magician."
Amazing.
Yeah, it brings tears to my eyes every time I read it. And I think that's what Jung was trying to do, to remind us about the magic all around us. You could definitely see it in that twinkle in his eye. The poet Yeats said, "The world is full of magical things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper." And Jung himself said, "What did you do as a child that made hours pass like minutes? Herein lies the key to your earthly pursuits." Okay, anyway, the interesting fact?
Can't wait.
Oh, you'll love this one. Ready?
I'm ready. However, I can't vouch for the rest of the collective unconscious.
And you may not want to, not after you hear this. Jung wrote a book about UFOs that was published in 1958.
Get out of here.
No, I'm not kidding. It's titled Flying Saucers, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Skies. Jung believed that UFO sightings may be a reflection of deep-seated fears, hopes, and anxieties of the modern world. a collective projection where people project their inner struggles and conflicts onto the idea of extraterrestrial visitors.
And he said he never heard of the X-Files. Jung's got an archetype, all right, and it's Fox Mulder. Or I guess it could be Dana Scully. Maybe a little bit of both. Anyhow, one more thing before we go.
What's that?
Season 2. Can you give us a preview? Tell us who the guests will be?
So, we're still collecting votes, but it looks like some fascinating women, including Simone de Beauvoir, Hannah Arendt, and perhaps Simone Weil and Ayn Rand. Listeners can visit our website or send an email to hello@iheardeadpeople.com and let us know who they'd like to hear from, and we'll see if we can get them on.
What do you mean, we'll see? Are there agents and other gatekeepers in the afterlife?
Pearly gatekeepers.
Okay, Tom. That joke was a little bit DOA, but I'll give it to you.
Thanks. By the way, Dorian, you've done a great job all season, keeping the conversation so spirited. And now, one last request for our listeners. Please be sure to leave us a review. We podcasters live and die by them, you know.
I think we better quit while we're ahead, Tom.
We do. Thank you for getting into the spirit of self-inquiry and personal transformation by tuning into the first season of I Hear Dead People. We worked really hard to strike a balance between wit and sincerity as we investigated the past in order to make sense of the present. And we'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who went above and into the great beyond to make this season possible. Our voice actors did an incredible job, quite literally raising the dead. Much gratitude to HWG Voices as the Buddha, Nestor Sierra as Plato, Eliran Hirsch as Jesus, Daniel Sakakini as Nietzsche, Dario DeSena as Marcus Aurelius, and Tom Park as Carl Jung. Shout out to our behind-the-scenes crew who worked hard to bring this ephemeral idea to life. Music producer Matt Nummy, logo designer and illustrator of all of our dead guests, Jason Walton, ghostwriter Trudy Roth, and executive producer Andy Asacker. And a big thanks to my co-host Dorion for turning our podcast into a time capsule of wit and wisdom, making each episode a journey back in time with a side of humor that's as timeless as our remarkable guests. I'm Tom Asacker, writer, co-host, and executive producer of I Hear Dead People. If you enjoyed this season and want us to do some further excavation of history's most compelling dead people, let us know by leaving us a review or visiting our website, iheardeadpeople.com. You can also show your support by purchasing one of our urn-shaped mugs adorned with your favorite dead person from Season 1. Thanks again, and stay lively.
People.